experience and my sense of things and my reading strongly suggest that the process of still sitting and of contemplation, of freeing the mind of thoughts and preconceptions and opening to what is a universal process whose insights and wisdom are available to anybody. And whether we come at a quest for awareness of the true nature of things from a Buddhist perspective or a Hindu perspective or a Taoist perspective or a Christian perspective, pretty much by definition, since the discovery is that there is just one thing going on, that anyone who discovers that there's just one thing going on is discovering the same thing. And then just using the language of their own particular tradition or the path by which they got there in order to describe a thing that, as we'll see repeatedly from this text, is in many ways fundamentally beyond description. We're going to cast our eyes toward the ineffable, ironically, by having me sit here and talk about it for some 40 minutes or whatever. In the middle of it, we'll sit still together for a little while and actually do the practice, and then we'll speak a little bit more. And along the way, please, if you have questions, just go ahead and raise your hand, because I'm eager to respond to what people's interests are. Why, I see a hand already.
What's the term Zen mean?
Zen, meaning I'm a practitioner of Zen Buddhism.
Oh.
Yes. And actually a teacher thereof, with many, many years of practice behind me. And one of the most satisfying discoveries about this text for me is just how deeply it resonates with the wisdom of Zen and of Taoism, which is really the core of Zen as I understand it. Sean.
Marianne online. Let's raise your hand.
Yes. Marianne.
Go ahead, Marianne from Bellingham.
Yes, thank you. I was raising my hand to ask you if you wanted us to raise our virtual hands if we're on Zoom.
Yes, that would probably be better than just hollering out, but I don't know. We'll just have to see how that goes. Sean, what's your take on that?
I can agree.
Yeah, so raise your hand, and then he'll give, and Sean will raise his hand, and I'll say, we have someone online, or something like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have a question? No, that was the question.
Yeah.
Correct.
Question about questions during that time. All right, so as I said, the reason I'm excited to be able to talk about the Cloud of Unknowing is because I feel that the central insight of all mystical and contemplative traditions is to open us to the non-dual nature of reality, which is to say that through letting various obstructions and misconceptions and other things fall away, what is discovered is that, as I said before somewhat jokingly, there is just one thing going on. Although it's not even one thing, it's not two. It's just, we live in a uniform, unified field of existence where boundaries between self and other, God and humanity, and so forth, fall away, as reported by the Enlightenment experiences and the experiences of people who will say that they have known in some way the presence of God, that this is a unifying experience, and so it's a natural human experience. It's for everybody. So we can look at it from a Zen perspective. Tonight we'll look at it from a more Christian perspective from this text, The Cloud of Unknowing. The text itself, which I commend to you particularly in this translation from Carmen Acevedo Butcher, a scholar of medieval languages and of Christian mystics in general. Heads and tails above any other one that I've read in terms of its approachability, modern language, practicality, and she's clearly a practitioner herself. So turn to that. The book itself, the original Cloud of Knowing, was written sometime in the 14th century by an anonymous English monk, we assume, but it's not known because their name was never known. And they appear to have made that choice on purpose, to not claim authorship of the text, though through other linguistic analysis and the claims of other people and so forth, there are a number of other books that are sort of known to be, or at least attributed to the same author, who I'll just refer to as the author or anonymous. Several other texts were written by this person. I say person because there's a chance it could be a woman. It's hard to say.
That's just what I was going to ask you. Could it be?
There's absolutely no reason not to. As far as I can tell, there's nothing that I read in there that gives it away.
Yeah.
All we know for sure is that the person to whom the book is written is a 24-year-old beginning contemplative of their own, who seems to be a student of the author. And through the evidence of the text, seems to have recently joined a monastery or recently committed themselves to a contemplative lifestyle, which is an odd and unusual thing, even to this day, to say farewell to society at large and head into a setting where most of every day is going to be committed to silent contemplation, to a practice that takes place in stillness. And he just, in an offhand way, says, you are only 24, blah, 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 blah. And that's how we know. Okay, so, and certainly from the tone of the author, it's clear that you're reading someone who has spent a lot of time sitting still and trying to become aware of God and God's essence, which is the promise of the book, that you can have that experience. Not the knowledge, but the experience. Much of the teaching of the book is rooted in earlier Christian mystics, in particular a person known as Dionysius the Areopagite, sometimes called pseudo-Dionysius because Dionysius wasn't actually their name. That was the author of that old text, which is from the 6th century, did a thing that many ancient authors did, which was claim to be someone more famous than themselves in order to have their work taken more seriously. Which is why I, the Dalai Lama, am here before you to share all of this insight for you. And though it has come to be really seen as a classic and widely regarded, it comes from the English-speaking tradition. There was only one version of it printed for modern readers, even up through the whole 1800s and everything. Evelyn Underhill, a famous English female mystic and popularizer of mysticism for many, noted that it had only been printed one time in 1871. She did a translation of it, which brought it into the discourse, and then it was rediscovered, as it were, by the founders and popularizers of the practice of centering prayer, if folks know about centering prayer. Father Thomas Keating, Father William Menninger, Basil Pennington in the 70s. And the core practice of centering prayer is the core practice of the Cloud of Unknowing, so there's a direct connection there. Okay. Now, interestingly, I'm obligated to honor the demand that is made by the author at the beginning of the book, who says, do not share this book or its teachings with anyone unless you are absolutely certain that they are serious about contemplative practice, deeply rooted in their tradition and their yearning for God. Everybody on board? Okay, good. I've done my part. You gotta go. Yeah. Trust me, it'll be better for you. Get out of here. No, sit down, sit down. You know, what can you do? There's 10 versions of it. It's too late now. You know, you can buy it at the bookstore. But once upon a time, there might have been good reason for someone writing a book of this nature to say, don't just let any person read it. Because it asks one thing in particular of us, hence the title, which can be threatening or troubling to all sorts of people and conceivably the religious authorities. Because the central premise of the text is, and we'll get into it more deeply, is if you really want to know God in God's essence, if you want to have the experience of the holy being in the here and now, you have to set down everything you think you know about God. You have to not root yourself in any form of knowledge or education or argument, and by extension, scripture, received teachings, dogma of the church, that when you first begin your quest, you'll find, what he calls this darkness, a cloud of unknowing. You're going to try and figure it out with your mind, but you cannot figure it out with your mind. So abandon the quest to figure it out with your mind. There are a lot of people who want to figure it out with their mind. So I think partly to keep from getting in any trouble. That's one reason why this admonition occurs at the very beginning of the book. A cloud of unknowing, don't know anything about it and don't even hope to know. And then also, what could also be called this, he speaks repeatedly of a cloud of forgetting, which is the flip side of that. Forget everything you've been taught. Forget anything anybody ever told you. Forget what you've read, what book you read it in. Forget every created thing, he says repeatedly. You are trying to approach this project from a place of complete openness. And there too, you can see why that could potentially get you in a little trouble. If a priest, a monk, whatever, is saying to another believer, don't worry about all that stuff we were taught. We're going to try a new way here. So, and he observes, correctly I think, that the contemplative path to really dedicate your life to the still, silent contemplation of the true nature of things, of God's essence, however you want to name ultimate reality, is a project that very few people are actually called to. Early in the book, he says there are 4 stages of maturity as a Christian. The ordinary, the special, the singular, and the perfect. And ordinary is like nearly all of us who just got the teachings, have a little bit of understanding, follow the leader, go to church, try and do good works, confess, try and live a good life, just normal, faithful behavior. Then this special, argues, is like for basically people who were called into some form of religious leadership, as this 24-year-old target of his wisdom is. It seems to be a priest or a monk or something. So, okay, I love the Bible, I love Jesus, I want to spread the teachings, I want to make the world a better place, I'm going to lead that. Okay, good. Even that is not for everybody, obviously. And then the next stage where you're like, I want even more than that. I want it all. I want the deep, deep water. And I guess echoing the old phrase, many are called, but few are chosen. It's just a fact. You look at the number of people over history who ever chose to sequester themselves in a monastery or a hermitage or something like that, and it's quite tiny. Which isn't to say that this path isn't available to everybody, and that you might not want to begin undertaking it this very night. Indeed, I hope you do. And we live in a different world now, where mysticism and the insights of the mystics of all the traditions and so forth are, a quick trip to Powell's away, and available to everybody. So we're not going to draw too fine a line between this, but it is interesting to read that the earliest chapters of the book are more or less our author telling, I'll just say his young charge, it's okay that you're doing this. It's a weird thing, and other people are going to give you a hard time for it. It's a long defense rooted in the story of Mary and Martha from the Bible, you may recall, where the two sisters are in their house, Jesus is visiting, maybe there's other people there, dinner going on, whatever it is, and Jesus is presumably teaching, or maybe he's just lounging on the couch drinking wine, which he seems to have been inclined to do. And Martha is fussing all around, trying to get everything pulled together, get the dishes done, get the corn chips out and stuff. And Mary is just sitting there basking in the radiant goodness and holiness of Jesus. And Martha ever, prods her sister, like, a lot of work to get done here. And Jesus basically says, Mary's got her own special thing going on here. Hers is the larger share, I think he says. And so our author is basically saying people are going to give you a hard time. And you can imagine why that might be. In a world of trouble, in a world of readily apparent needs of all kinds, to say, well, here's how I'm going to contribute. I'm going to go in that tiny little hut and sit still and try to get to know God in God's essence. And many have argued that that's a useless or kind of pointless activity in the face of all of those needs. Our author says no, that actually this is the highest spiritual work that can be done. It's the whole point of religion, if you really want to go down that path. What would, you know about God, that's cool. What could be better than actually knowing or being aware of? I'm going to stumble over my language. I said knowing because you don't know, but being aware of, experiencing the essence of God's being, and makes a lovely and humorous argument for it, not least by saying that that it is still of benefit to the world, because people who really take the time to do the practice required in order to have the insight, which involves abandoning so many delusions and wrong-headed ideas and ways of being, that a natural outcome of that process is that you are a kinder, more radiant, more loving, more gentle, more forgiving, more open-minded and open-hearted person. And the world really needs those two. So, first chapters, you're doing the right thing. I'm with you all the way. So I'm saying that to you, too. If you were thinking, shall I begin my contemplative practice? The answer is yes. All right. Before beginning the project, the author strongly counsels the need for humility and confession. That if you want to lay yourself bare and make yourself available for the influx of God essence, you have to first acknowledge that maybe you have not made yourself as fully ready as you could or should be, and there have been things you've done in the past that are going to get in the way. And throughout the book, self-knowledge, true self-awareness, true humility once you get to know yourself, which is an inevitable byproduct of sitting still with yourself for hours on end. There's, oh, you think you know yourself now. Spend a week just sitting still, and the full scope of yourself becomes apparent. And for many beginning meditators, I can speak to this firsthand, it's like all your crap. It's your obsessive thoughts. It's your attachments. It's the stories you tell yourself. It's your lingering resentments. All of the crud that an ego-oriented human being accumulates. And he says you kind of have to own that stuff, be real about yourself, and set it down. So before beginning the practice, just a straight-up full confession and humility is required. And that really struck me because we do exactly the same thing in Zen. Before the beginning of every service, when everybody gets together to do a little chanting and then sit in meditation, this is a group I'm with on Monday nights, the first part of the sutra service, the first part of the chanting is what we call the atonement or purification. And you basically say, all the evil karma ever committed by me since of old, basically every bad thing I ever did, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born of my body, speech, and conduct, I now confess openly and fully. So even in Zen, before you're going to sit there and receive and engage with true nature, you have to acknowledge, boy, since the last time I was here, I did not keep myself focused solely on God or on awakening or any other way of expressing the ultimate. So the groundwork of the practice is rooted in humility and self-awareness. My God, it's 6:30 already. How does that happen? Okay. So the key thing before we get into the technique, as I said before, is anything you think you know about God, you got to erase it. He says, here's how to do the work of contemplation. Lift up your heart to God with a gentle stirring of love. Focus on Him alone. Want Him and not anything He's made. Think on nothing but Him. Don't let anything else run through your mind and will. Here's how. Forget what you know. Forget everything God made and everybody who exists and everything that's going on in the world. Until your thoughts and emotions aren't focused on or reaching toward anything, not in a general way and not in a particular way. Let them be. For the moment, don't care about anything. This is the work of the soul that most pleases God. That's an odd thing to hear, perhaps. Well, that's easier said than done. To sit still and not have thoughts, to not have knowledge of things, to not have awareness of other people or what's going on in the world around you or any other, that's just not an easy thing to do. But that is the task. A cloud of unknowing upward toward God and a cloud of forgetting all the way down to everything that was ever made. And it may strike you as odd that a person who's clearly an expert in the contemplative practice, which is all about becoming aware and knowing and understanding God, he even says in this wonderful quote, I know you'll ask me, well, how do I think on God as God without thinking about other stuff? And who is God? And I can only answer, I don't know. I don't know. Now, that's a beautiful confession, I think, of a liberating honesty, hopefully empowering. Like, you don't have to know what you're aiming for. You don't have to know anything. Just be with what is. And this not knowing is a common theme in the mystical traditions. It's repeatedly affirmed in the Tao Te Ching, and it's throughout Zen. Don't know. There's a great Zen koan. When the master asks his student, "Where are you going?" And the student says, "Around on pilgrimage." And the master says, "Oh, well, what's the purpose of pilgrimage?" And he says, "I don't know." And the master says, not knowing is most intimate. So there's this notion that if we approach not just God, but life itself, anything, each other, I would argue in particular, if instead of like sussing you up and judging based on what I know about you and your appearance and so forth, if instead I approach you with a heart of, I don't know anything about you, I'm actually more open to receiving what you really are. And our relationship can be more alive and free and true if it's not got preconceptions in the way. And so he speaks repeatedly, the author, of bringing what he calls naked apprehension or blind intent, a blind stirring. You have this thought, I want to know God. Okay, that's all that's required. Don't add anything to it. And he argues repeatedly, beautifully, that the relationship with God that you desire is not going to be marked by knowledge. The layers of the heavens, how the saints work, what actually happened on Good Friday or Easter Sunday or any other thing. That's not that's not the gift. That's not the path. The path is love. That you are sitting still not to know God intellectually or with ideas or with theology or dogma. You're sitting still and opening your mind and heart so that you can love God and so that you can know God's love for you, which is the flip side of things. And so the goal is to sit and not even so much say, I want to know you to God. That's to say, I want to love you. I want to love you. And it's hard to love something invisible, mysterious, ungraspable. But we love each other, and we're actually that too. So central to the path is an orientation into feeling and experience more than knowledge and analysis. What you want is a thing that you can experience, not a thing that you'll have with your head and your mind. I'll pause there. Any questions or responses to that so far?
You listed 3 of 4 levels.
Oh, 3 or 4 levels.
Fourth level.
Oh, yes. Ordinary, special, singular, which is like monastics and whatnot, and then perfect, which is like when you're enlightened, I guess. And he says you can have a taste of the perfect in this world, but you'll get the perfect completely after you die, when your soul is released up into heaven. There's almost no time spent on like the Christian story or schemes of heaven and hell at all. The author seems to assume that at least his 24-year-old charge will go to heaven, and seems to be hoping that he'll get there himself. But perfect is listed because in those moments where everything falls away and God's essence or the true nature is revealed, that's a taste of the perfect nature of things that underlies reality under its forms. Sorry, thanks. I forgot the perfect. Not anywhere close, that's why. Any other questions or comments? Okay. And so you must cultivate a setting down of everything you know and a growing of a deep feeling of longing for God in God's self, just the essence of the holy in its own self. And in multiple passages, he equates that essence with love, I would say. Mercy is invoked, benevolence, and so forth. There's no doubt that God is good in the experience of our but again, it's not a thing that you might necessarily be able to articulate. It's a growing of the pure love of God.
So we set aside the theology, but not the love and the mercy and all the other things we were talking about. Those two we don't set aside. Yes.
Well, so the question, if you couldn't hear it, we set aside the theology, but we don't set aside the love. Yes, I would say. But that's not to say, because here's the thing. If you go into it with a whole bunch of ideas, even, it's slippery territory. I mean, this is the core challenge of all contemplative traditions, is the essence of things is beyond words and letters. But you want to turn people on to it, so you got to say something. And the experience of the presence of God in the Christian tradition or theistic traditions reads the very same way as the experience of awakening in non-theistic traditions. It's luminous, it's glowing, it's benevolent. Like when everything falls away and a Buddhist describes their enlightenment experience, I could share mine. It's like the world is radiating love. It's made out of love, is the feeling of the thing. And that's why I think that the author and many others, everybody really in any mystical tradition, they, even though it's like, you don't know anything about God, don't even think God's merciful, don't even add that to it ahead of time. But guess what you're going to discover? You know, in Zen, we say ultimate reality is completely beyond good and evil. It has no categories whatsoever. The essence of the thing is so unfindable and ungraspable, we call it emptiness. But that emptiness is full of life. And when you wake up to it, not only do you experience a feeling of fantastic goodness, but you want to share that goodness too. So the way I usually put it is, reality is completely beyond good and evil, but it's actually really good. And I don't think this author would disagree that there's but it's an even deeper sort of happiness or love or benevolence that we can navigate with our words and ideas. And because of the nature of things is not dualistic, truly, then when you enter that awareness, you're actually kind of getting the God's eye view of the world, of pure, all-embracing, completely accepting, everything is allowed here, I am for all of you, love. And Emerson, at one point after his experience, said, I am the eyeball that God sees the world with. People made fun of him for it, but I know what he's talking about. You aren't. Okay. So the basic technique.
Chris, we have a raised hand.
All right.
Jen Schiller.
Hi, Chris. This is Jan.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, it's so good to see you. I had the question of, is the experience the same, or is it unique to each person? Thank you.
Your question is well asked. Let's move on. No. Zen trickery there. I would say that it is both. That, of course, we all come to the insights about truth through our own path. And you're going to use the language you are most fluent in, and you're going to reference the texts you've read, and the mirror that's in which you see your true nature there is showing you as yourself. So it is both. But the essence of the thing transcends all individuality. It actually shows us that we are of the same nature as all beings and as everybody around us, that everyone has Christ nature. The Buddha's enlightenment was simply to wake up and realize, oh my gosh, every single person, all beings, indeed, all being, the stones and clouds, everything has Buddha nature. Everything. And as far as I can tell, from the little that our author will say about how he experiences the Christian mystical awareness, it's the same thing. God is in, of, for everybody. God is everybody. Everybody is love. It's all, flip-flops back and forth. So the one and the many are the same thing in the end. I hope I answered that question. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so how do you do it then? It's funny. There's really just like one little chapter. He's like, here's how it works. Sit still. No instructions even about posture and that sort of thing, which we get all uptight about in Zen, but it's just like, be still. Cast up that cloud of unknowing. Cast down that cloud of forgetting. And utilize a single word as an object of focus, as a short, pithy prayer that itself encompasses your whole desperate longing to know God and God's self truly. And he suggests either the word love or the word God. And so rather than being like, okay, God, I really want to know you. Please reveal yourself to me. No, now you're getting way too complicated. Collapse the whole project, collapse the whole intent and longing into just one word. And it bears a resemblance to practicing with mantras, to chanting Om. Chanting Om and chanting God are chanting the same thing, essentially. In Zen with the koans, which are Zen teaching stories and so forth, one of the key and often first koans that people work on involves carrying around a single word, mu, which means no or nothingness. Just take one word and bring it in front of everything you encounter all day long. And he says basically do the same thing. Whether you're sitting still, whether you're out there farming, with each breath, God, God, God. And as a focusing technique, just for even, fairly simple, basic meditation that just relaxes you and lowers your blood pressure and stuff like that, it's good to have an anchor. Which is why people work with a mantra or their breaths, which is very common. But instead of just counting your breaths with every exhalation, you might just say, God. Now, later in the book, he goes on to talk about, how can that work? And a single word, how could it have enough power? And quite wonderfully says, think about if someone says, if you're out there in the village square or whatever, and you hear somebody like, hey, that word stirs you to action, moves your soul, something is going to be responded to that. If somebody yells fire, everybody leaps into action immediately. And he basically says, you invest that word that you're going to use as your anchor in stillness with some of that level of intensity. And that was really helpful for me because I've been practicing this since I read the book first. I had to. And it's like, it's one thing to just be like, God, God, then it just turns into a sound. But if you actually and he said, don't say it out loud, say it in your mind. You can say it out loud. He repeatedly says, he's going on and on, he's like, don't don't do lots of noisy prayers. Don't do lots of outward actions. Don't try and impress anybody with the way you look or whatever. On the other hand, if you find yourself singing, sing. It's like you got to follow the stirrings of the spirit. But you use that word as an anchor of your awareness and as the expression of that blind intent. I don't know what God is. I just know that God is. Or I believe, I'm faithful, I trust that God is. And I'm going to invest all my yearning in just that word, God. God. And it's interesting to observe the differences in feeling states that arise if you use other words, if you use the word love, for example. Love. Which is in many ways more approachable for me because it's sort of an invitation to the state of being I want to be manifesting, within which I'm sure that God is moving. Okay, any questions about that? Because then we're going to try it. Okay, so we're just going to take like 5 minutes, all right? Time has flown by. And sit yourself comfortably. And this, by the way, is the central practice of the whole thing called centering prayer that I described earlier with Father Thomas Keating and all those others, David Frenette locally, Cynthia Bourgeot, others, who in our age have reclaimed these mystical practices and made them widely available to others. I commend you to their works. So this is the practice of centering prayer, which is rooted in the Cloud of Unknowing. So for just a few minutes then here, we'll take a deep breath, and as with any contemplative practice, it helps to be both comfortable but also fully alert, which is why most monastic practices, mystical practices of whatever kind, involve what we think of as meditation, which is sitting still with an upright posture where you can let your spine be the tree of the world that keeps you steady and still, so you don't have to exert any musculature in order to stay in your position, and you're not creaked in some weird way. Balanced, harmonious, hands on your lap, or in prayer. In Zen we do this, and eyes may be open. That's generally seen as better than closed because you're still engaged with the world. And we'll just be still for a little while together. And with each out breath or each in breath, try them both. Pick your one word, God or love, and let's just do it for a few minutes. Let's bring ourselves back to the room and to each other. Sorry, I don't have a bell to ring. It's always very difficult for me to take up talking again after we've been sitting still for a little while. My Quaker friends know all about it. Because that is so much richer. Any observations or wonderings about that? It's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
How do you know when you've got the right word?
How do you know when you've got the right word? It will feel right. The author counsels strongly that his charge pick either love or God, and seems to lean more into God as the best word for this practice. Partly because his whole scheme and experience is rooted in the conviction that actually it's God herself that's motivated you to ever sit down and do it in the very first place. In the book of Privy Council, he says God is the doorkeeper and the door. It's actually God, and this is in other traditions too, in Buddhism as well. What is Buddha? Buddha is that thing in you that asks, what is Buddha? What is God? God is the thing in you that's like, I want to know God. That's actually motivated from beyond the small self. And so I think that word has, for him, extra power because it's, rooted in that faith about that relationship and about that being. But for some, that word could be so loaded with baggage or whatnot that you feel like too much knowing is going on from what you've been taught, in which case a word like love might be a better word. I think because he's suggesting that all of the other prayers you ever might offer for others' well-being, for peace on earth, for your own growth and insight and everything, are to be collapsed into that single word. God would also have a little extra oomph because of that. I would say it should be a word that for you conveys the whole, WHOLE. The completeness, the ultimate, whatever the ultimate goodness is, the object of your longing. So you probably wouldn't have the same effect and he says one syllable. Don't even do two syllables. Too much work. So duck, I guess you could use. And I don't know what might come of it. And if God is a duck for you, duck bless you. But so it should be a word that has some power. His advice, and this is true in other traditions as well, it's like, don't spend too much time on it though. Like if you get into the thing of like, ooh, do I have the right word? Is that the best word? It's like, so too with a sitting posture or whatever. It's like, pick one, man, just pick one. Like go. So I would trust your feeling. Whatever word captures the longing for the greatest good, use that word. What word did you use?
I tried a few.
Uh-huh.
None of them quite clicked, but
Right.
if there are criteria,
Right.
keep it to a syllable, etc.
Keep it to a syllable. And maybe I mean, it'd be okay to try different ones, but what I would suggest, if you wanted to really take this practice, would be do one for a month and liberate yourself from the thought, I better get the right word. And go with duck if it helps, you know. Because it's as much the centering power of just that little tool in mind as it is the concept behind the word. So, yeah. Anyone else? Observations, questions, or anything? All right. Online? Oh, yes.
Does it typically manifest after the session, whatever it makes you do? Is calm, relaxation.
Did you experience that?
I felt relaxation.
Yes. So relaxation is actually, I would say, just a physical byproduct of sitting still and attending to your breath. There was a book written out of Harvard some years ago, The Relaxation Response. I can't remember the author. He wrote it. And it was a purely medical, non-spiritual analysis of meditation practices or whatever. And doctor accurately observed what we've all just experienced, or I hope most of us did, which is if you just be still and pay attention to something repetitive, like the breath, is what they studied, you will relax. You can't not. You are generating the conditions of calm and relaxation. And for some folks, that can be a fresh experience. But the beauty of it is it's a tasty experience. Did you find it so? I mean, it's nice to be relaxed, right? Yeah. For me, I prefer to be relaxed than uptight, or calm than stressed, and so forth. And merely breathing and paying attention to it will do that. Merely breathing and paying attention to it may not blow your mind into God consciousness, which is what our author is inviting us to, or other mystics of other traditions are doing. That does generally appear to take a certain amount more intention and intensity. In Buddhism, we say that you're supposed to get rid of all desires, but the desire you get rid of last is the desire to get rid of all desires. Because you got to keep that one. You got a desire to get rid of all your desires until you've got rid of all your desires, and then you'd be like, I can get rid of my desire to have desires even now. Then you can get rid of the desire to have the desire to get rid of desires, and you're truly free. Carol.
Well, when you relax, though, the problem is that you can fall asleep very easily. So then you feel like you've blown it, right?
Yes. So what I would say, blown it is a thought and a concept and a judgment, an assessment of things, and that should be cast into the cloud of forgetting or whatever. And in the real world, maybe you needed a nap. That's cool. God's still here. God loves you. She's waiting. He's here. It's all good. And then you might learn something from that. Maybe I need more sleep if I'm going to be serious about my contemplative practice. But also, that's one reason sleepiness is one of the core obstacles of contemplative practice. It's just a fact, particularly when you're new to it. If you live a stressed life, and then merely relaxing at all for 5 minutes, a lot of people can do that. To me, that's like valuable wisdom. That's your own body and the sacred saying to you, you need more sleep, get rest. But that's also why there's emphasis on posture, sitting erect in a certain manner where it's a little harder to fall asleep. I mean, you can try meditating laying down, but
Sure.
yeah. I will just pass on if sleepiness is a barrier, that which very much was for me when I first started practicing. A Zen teacher said to me, well, next time you find that happening, observe your sleepiness. Look at what sleepiness feels like. And that turned out to be enough of expanding the field of awareness, which is sort of what this is all about, is expanding the field of awareness into infinity, into God awareness. But anything we do that gives us a little step back and more spaciousness to hold what is, then that part is alive and awake, always. My God, it worked. From over here, then I could start seeing like, wow, my body gets heavy, my eyelids are heavy, and almost, honestly, over the course of that meditation week, that advice, it nipped it in the bud. I've almost never struggled with it since. And if I'm really, really sleepy, now I'm the sort of Zenny who I just go take a nap.
Hey, Chris.
Did I hear a voice from beyond?
Yeah, it's Mark.
Okay.
There was initially there was the question of we didn't hear what the initial question was that you first answered. That's point number one. Point number two is I do have a question in the chat that I would want to give. So number one, what was the initial question that you asked? Off to your right? A person off to your right.
Did someone ask? I don't know. There have been multiple questions. I don't think we can go back in time. I'm sorry.
The question I asked.
Yeah.
But the online person asked.
I'm afraid I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll try and repeat more questions going forward.
Okay, the second one is there anything in the book that emphasizes and or talks to apophatic, non-dual practices as a cultivation of intention, as different than typical cultivation practices, cataphatic for cultivation of attention?
Well, the whole scheme of the book is apophatic. And for our is that Greek speakers or Latin, apophatic?
Well,
Latin?
no, Greek.
Yeah, be Greek, I think. Thank you. Apophatic means essentially denial, to not say, whereas cataphatic is to say or to proclaim. So apophatic theology, that's a whole category. This book is a part of it. Is the via negativa. It's the way of getting to know what God is by stripping away everything you can tell isn't God, at least not God in God's totality. I know God is not just this water bottle. I know I'm made of God. I'm in God. God sees and lives through me. But little Chris Bell, not God. So you strip things away, and what's left is the infinite field of empty awareness that is God. So apophatic is say no to everything and see what remains. And cataphatic would be more discerning what you say yes to. And that would probably, if I understand the question, mean like, standard prayers and practices, worship and these sorts of things where through proclamations and affirmations and intentions, you're trying to steer yourself in a direction. And that has its value. But the mystics, as a general rule, I would say, I think it's uniform, go the apophatic route. Let things fall away and see what remains. I hope that answered that question. And I'll demonstrate the point, and then we'd be done. I'm sorry to say. And there's so much more in the book. I really commend it to, particularly this translation, how to deal with thoughts in meditation that are distracting, how not to overexert yourself, how to find a nice balance with your practice, to be still and love that God is God. So please do turn to it. But that apophatic quality is really the essence. And the book itself is, and the author even says as much, is rooted, as I said, in the teachings of Dionysius, pseudo-Dionysius, sometimes called Dennis the Arapagite, Saint Dennis, who later became the patron saint of Paris, and who, interestingly, is the one who got his head cut off, but miraculously lived. And some of the statues, I think there's one at Notre Dame, is St. Dennis is carrying his head right here, which is a beautiful image for the apophatic way. I want to know God, so I'm going to take this thing off, sit it over here on the side and not let it rule the roost, and we'll let body and soul lead us forward through life. So this is the words from Dennis the Arapagite, source material for the Cloud of Unknowing, and the description of the apophatic via negativa Cloud of Unknowing way. At the end of his mystical theology, which Dennis the Arapagite wrote, Dionysius, he says, again, as we climb higher, we say this. This is about the divine essence, about the true nature of things. It is not soul or mind, nor does it possess imagination, conviction, speech, or understanding. It cannot be spoken of, and it cannot be grasped by understanding. It is not number or order, greatness or smallness, equality or inequality, similarity or dissimilarity. It is not immovable, moving, or at rest. It has no power. It is not power, nor is it light. It does not live, nor is it life. It is not a substance, nor is it eternity or time. It cannot be grasped by the understanding, since it is neither knowledge nor truth. It is neither one nor oneness, divinity nor goodness. It is not sonship or fatherhood. It is nothing known to us or any other being. It falls neither within the predicate of non-being nor of being. I can quote you a Buddhist sutra that says exactly the same thing. Existing beings do not know it as it actually is, and it does not know them as they are. There is no speaking of it, nor name, nor knowledge of it. Darkness and light, error and truth, it is none of these. We make assertions and denials of what is next to it, but never of it. For it is both beyond every assertion, being the perfect and unique cause of all things, and by virtue of its preeminently simple and absolute nature, free of every limitation. That not thing is the thing we're aiming for. And it might sound strange that something that takes you, an experience that would take you completely outside the realm of any ability to describe, would satisfy the deepest longing of your life. But I'll tell you, and this author will tell you, it does. We'll stop there. How's that? Thanks.